Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lifting. This episode is being recorded on 9/2/24. This, I will have to say, is actually quite interesting because some of the best themes we've actually come up with of late, and we've had real tough time coming up with different themes, especially in light of the cancellation of that third part of the World of Sasquatch, the one from Spirit Lake that got ripped down from YouTube. In light of this, it's actually getting more and more difficult to come up with themes that don't get spied upon or prying eyes on them that you don't want. And we know that's in a lot of places, but it's not everywhere. They don't notice every single detail. But with this falls more under some of these other things that are allowed, especially if you have a voice out there that is, a message that is very, very important. It seems to hover around. Some of it was the DNA manipulation, which was the Sasquatch episode, but the one crux of what we are trying to get at today, I'm taking these off because there's a reflecting. They're blue this time. What we're trying to get at is we were watching a YouTube video about a lot of the poisons that are in the foods, a lot of these altering chemicals that they put in there that alter the DNA, alters thoughts, and you know a lot about this. There's the psionic and then there's the chemical inducement. There's the two factors here that really, really hit people hard. Psionic, which is the reason for this hat, that's V2K, and chemical. And you heard me during the lecture at the Disclosure Now conference mention that SpongeBob episode with the raining cloud made everybody stupid. Go back and listen to that if you want to hear me talk about that. Then they re-educated people through the education system after they made them dumb. That's under the dumbing category. This was more about why the medical industry basically allows a lot of this chemically ridden poison food through. And before, I do want to put this into perspective as well. Just prior to this episode, but us hitting the record button, you want to talk about a minor, I don't want to say minor, but a small series of unfortunate events. My body, I get very mad at this physical form because of the fact that it sometimes will listen to external stimuli from V2K specifically, and I'm aware that it is taking place, so therefore it should not, and that could be a question that is posed here in a little bit. I not only had to go to the bathroom suddenly, and it was going to take its time to get all of that out. Yes, Isaac, I will tell them I had to take a shit. Thank you. You can say that all you want later, but I will do so. But anyway, not only that, I came in here and literally my hand, without me controlling it, the motor functions, grabbed the mouse and went to shut the computer off. I had to literally take my hand and bang it against the side of the desk to stop it. And pain will knock you out of that stupor. I was aware it was going on, but it was so strong that for whatever reason, my brain could not help itself. To me, that's scary. And I believe that's the psionic aspect of this, folks. You can watch our Agent Smith Effect episode on that and go to galacticinterstellarcouncil.com for information on the psionic wars. But the other half of it is chemical inducement that is in the foods. And what I have been able to see in my sessions, and this may surprise people, literally of late, within the past 3 or 4 months, every single client has come up with the same symptom. Basically weakness, feeling sick, being susceptible to viruses, being susceptible to outward thoughts, like what I just said, being susceptible, like I got the shingles, remember that, after I got rid of the nanovirus. One thing after another, we even got hit with a cold. This is why you're hearing us sneezing and coughing during this. You probably heard on GSC us going, that whole bit. The whole domino effect of effects from one series of unfortunate events to the other, even little accidents more are popping up. Running into walls, becoming vertigo dizzy, not recognizing even an environment you're in. I've heard this one before. being so weak, the person couldn't stand up out of a chair. This has been popping up across the board. The volume, even in the past few months, has been turned up so loud from both V2K and chemical inducement, it makes life unbearable. The devices are even having a hard time with that. And they're working, mind you. And it always seems fortuitous when I end up making tower busters for one task and it ends up being synchronistic to another task and discovering something, not only some buried memories of mine, which is another thing that was hitting hit, and doing shadow work, the usual, but getting a bit protecting against some external source that I was unaware had been turned up. And I did notice this, and it's not the only reason, only cure all. But when we went to Spirit Lake, I noticed I had virtually none of these issues. And I'm not saying it's that space specifically, even though it's a ley line intersection, it's nature that helps with these things. It does not take the poisons out of the food. It helps with the psionic issue that is causing things to get worse. Like if there's a toxin in you, and I've seen this before, where the GMO foods break down in someone's body. I saw this weird hand sanitizer like crap that was in someone's body, and I deduced that this chemical was making people stupid. And it was also, along with the psionic inducement, and it was being harvested and collected by different ET races and government and military factions. That's it in a nutshell. And this is actually it's disturbing, but it's also fascinating as to how or why this is being allowed.
So it's the one thing that kind of, I've been noticing over the last month or so are the conversations that are being allowed.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't feel these conversations were allowed a year ago, not in earnest. So something has happened to start having the conversation now in earnest regarding, and again, what a lot of these medical professionals and different people are speaking about are about the concepts that's been wandering around in a lot of our minds for years, talking about processed and ultra processed foods, what it's doing to society as a whole, what it's doing to the children, and an interesting dynamic that about the medical professional when people are going through school to learn. What they're not learning about is, again, a system-wide approach to how your body functions rather than compartmentalization of how to treat a disease process, not how to cure a system-wide problem that is leading to the disease process. Many people, if you go to school, if you know that they're even becoming doctors or whatever, there's nothing about nutrition and those types of things. So the questions of, again, the sugars in your diet, the ultra processed food that are becoming a part, the inaccessibility of maybe foods that are more organic related to maybe if you're more impoverished, can you even acquire them to help yourself out? What it means to pharmaceutical companies to get people on lifelong drugs as soon as possible, how that affects the pocketbooks and everything. All these questions are now being allowed to be addressed, and I don't know any other way to say it because it really wasn't. I know for a fact that the big medical event that happened, in 2020 and later on, really had a lot of bickering and a lot of, you couldn't say certain things or whatever. You were, right. You still can't, obviously, because that happened to us. But in all of these things that were happening, really, I think brought it to the forefront of a fight worth having, a conversation worth pursuing, really looking at the dynamics of how these industries work together. And is it for humanity's highest good? And again, just simplistic things. In this particular country, in the United States, what is allowed that isn't allowed elsewhere regarding foods, pesticides, how they're processed and everything. When you look at other countries that don't have some of the problems we have, what you're going to see in general is that they don't allow these ultra processed foods that are becoming a mainstay in the American diet. And anywhere where the American ultra processed foods seem to be introduced across the world, you start to have the same problems in earnest that you seem to have in the United States in the healthcare that you don't necessarily see in other parts of the world where these things are not allowed, be it starting from pesticides or other issues. And what's interesting to me is in earnest how these conversations are now being allowed. I find it interesting, even on the political stage, you now have RFK Jr. getting being able to also bring up these very important subjects related to childhood and childhood health and the dynamics of the food system and all of these components coming out for discussion now in earnest. And so my question was, and Chris and I've been talking, is what is happening that, first of all, that is allowing these conversations to be had when they weren't allowed to be had a year ago?
Mm-hmm.
What's happened, and then again, as someone who is a bit pragmatic in their thought process, what's not being talked about? Then, if you're allowing for this, then is there a yield involved that's not allowing for conversation of something else? And what is that something else?
Yeah.
So I have to tell you, my mind works that way because I kind of always am in this strategy mindset of how to push an agenda through. What are the strategies you use to how to make all of that happen? Although I try not to get too involved with constantly talking about either the political system or things like that, there are strategies that are involved to move the psyche of humanity and to get them to buy into things that maybe aren't for their highest good. In this particular instance, it is brought up by these people that, after World War II, there became such, with the advent of really good things, really good antibiotics, really good things that seem to help humanity, that there became this overwhelming trust that then apparently was manipulated. And so again, you people can now look back in hindsight and even tell you some of the potential questionable, concerning starting points for certain drugs that could take you all the way back down to the Nazi regime again. A lot of things can go back all the way there.
They were psychological, psionic, and chemical.
Right. And so again, when Operation Paperclip came in, those same scientists and people were brought in to work in the industries here. And so the continuation of some of these altering type of things to how do you control people? How do you control, a society? And what's really happening. Again, I am never a person that says you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think the pressures on anyone who go into the medical system with the thought of doing no harm are bamboozled and stressed to the point that they, again, may be participating in something that they really don't necessarily feel good about, but feel a little helpless. So I think having this conversation will hopefully broaden the ability for those people to speak out more. I applaud the ones that are. I applaud the ones that have stepped away from it and are trying to bring this information out. Because again, I do not believe that the people of the United States want to be ill. I do not believe the people of the United States want their children to be having chronic illnesses that are showing so early in their lives. I don't believe any of it, but I think there's such a great knowledge deficit going on that until these things are really talked about, parents and loving members of society have to put their heads together to figure how do we make these things stop. And we don't want to see it for our children in the generations to come. And we don't want to see it for another person's children or generations to come. So this is across all spectrums across basically the world. But I think one of the simple things is if you don't get a chance to travel and you don't get a chance to see what is allowed or not allowed elsewhere, you think everyone is like you. And I can tell you, we had an opportunity. We've said this before. We were in Japan for 3 weeks and his GI problems went away.
They were
And
gone.
it was 100% related to the food. We were not eating Americanized Japanese food.
We were eating
living
Japanese
in-
food.
We're living in with the localities and with the locals and eating what they ate. And there are much more stringent rules. So the fact that something, that's so consuming in his life day to day in the United States can be cleaned up in a matter of just weeks is, very sad, to think that it really is something that can be helped pretty quickly. And I think, again, people need to be aware. But my main question of really wanting to drive this conversation was because again, looking at the strategy, what's allowing this conversation to be had now? It's really, it's a long time coming. I'm glad it's happening, but I want to know the behind the scenes, either agreements or what in the world has happened that's now allowing for the conversation. So I'm hoping, that can be a nice component of bringing someone in to talk about it.
Yeah, and also I wanted to say as well, some people believe it's because they're allergic to a certain group of plants, like either nightshades or some flower or some blooming vegetable or something like that. And yeah, if there were none of these poisons in place, that would still hold, and that held in ancient times. But also, for a long time, people believed, tomatoes were poisonous, and it was actually off the lead plates they were eating, off the lead in the pewter plates. The reason I bring this up is because people are misidentifying what's going on, because they also, on top of that, in today's age, don't want to believe something that evil is around. It's more of a cognitive dissonance that's in that. And the psionics has to do with some of this. Just like, we saw in the video earlier, there was also a lot of the weed poisons that are using. You heard Ben Ortfoil bring this up at length too in one of our recordings about the alien elemental war. Whereas even the people were constantly self-farming it because they were afraid of being fined by an HOA or fined by an institution, or they just want to do it because they don't want to believe such evil exists that they would unwittingly be part of. And I understand this, but at the same time, people need to actually become aware. I know part of the answer to that question is people need to see this, even amidst the psionic dampening. We call it the dumpening. Yeah. Thank you, Isaac, for putting that in my head. But the dumpening, we called it. The Sasquatch found that funny. But it's actually psionic dampening, bringing the intelligence level down. But that's only one half of the equation. The other ones is the poisoning, and then there's also another fragment in there where people must become aware of this, regardless of what's around. The volume is turned up so loud in the poisoning area. You cannot for very long blame it on anything else but what has been added to the food and what is in our skies. The other chemical component that also is in that SpongeBob episode is chem clouds and chemtrails. That's there. It's in our water, the fluoridation, and none of the even the psionic dampening. We saw none of these things in Japan. Now, there was our AI influence there. Yes, there was, but that AI had a different personality to it. It wasn't as punch, it was more of a subversion. But
well, again, every area that we believe in the world
has had this to its own variety, has its own
issues. What we have here in the United States has a lot to do, it appears, with health issues related to and metabolic disorders in general, which create all kinds of problems the diseases that seem to come on now earlier in life than ever before. It all starts with this on the cellular level, a metabolic dysfunction that's beginning to happen, and then it cascades itself. It shows up in, again, diseases coming on earlier, the increase of infertility issues that are happening. And so if you really try to look at the cause and not just treating the disease, there are many, many reputable people that are pointing to now the food supply and are getting a chance to say these things at a greater level than I've ever seen. And so again, I'd like that concept to be brought up as to why. So maybe we should just go ahead and bring someone in.
All right. All right. As loud as Isaac's been, I thought he was going to be the proponent here. No. Okay, so let's see. One would think you would be it here, but okay. You usually are. So ironically enough, I got a little, we were watching when we watch, I'll bring this up slightly. This falls into the psionic area, but watching our television and even watching YouTube on the TV, you guys probably have noticed some of you probably noticed you get sleepy just looking at it. That's what's known as the black box effect, where there's like a portal coming through the TV. That's part of the dampening field or the binary network concept, and also dimensional beings coming through it, et cetera, et cetera. And I've seen these little creatures with like they look like little Quidditch balls that come through the screen. We had a nickname, Gobsmackers, for them, but they're part of the reptilian garbage. But I won't get into that. But I noticed this creepy feeling. My eyes feel like they're swelling up. Glasses on, glasses off, don't matter. It's the TV specifically, and it's YouTube specifically. So I think you probably all gathered by the crux of this conversation. So it's more than likely going to be a Rumble conversation. So I will just share it from there to our Facebook, from there and other areas like our Twitter, X. Yeah, God, you like to correct me today. Okay, X Twitter. Yeah, I know the joke, Isaac. Okay, since I don't see anybody else, you come here. Okay, no what? Oh, okay. Is it Elena Best at this time or the Forest people? Oh, okay. Okay, we'll go with Elena. That's fine. Okay. All right. Situated here. Let's see. Okay. The reason I'm not seeing a whole lot is some of the noise I see around is V2K oriented. And that's also some of the reason why I was telling you about the hand and about having to go to the bathroom and everything. These things. Can't wear them for very long or your brain loses some immunity. But go to our episode on the warnings before the spells. We talked about this kind of this subject for EMF gear. So, yes, I've shut up. You can come in. The coughing started, and that shows it, folks, right as that was starting. You ask the main question, why is this allowed? That is a loaded question. None of us of conscience allow is whether we have the capability of putting an end to it. Just like, I will use this as an example. Would anybody, even on this block, be able to stop this on their own? No, I would suspect not. But the ones you can blame for allowing are those pulling the string. Yes, people need to notice it, of course, to begin to change it. That's an absolute fact. But on the other end, the as above, so below tether, as it were, are those that are turning a blind eye to some of the things happening down here that could change these things in the blink of an eye. But we know that society needs to disseminate this information over a period of time, as Vesa said about the decoding encoding in the past. However, you can integrate things slowly enough that some of these things could be weeded out. And eventually, there would be no choice but to reveal a whole new paradigm of technology and experiences for humanity. However, out there, you have some obstinate people, let's say, that think sitting around and waiting to vote on things out there is the way to go. Now, that would normally be fine in a regular democracy. I'm talking about the Galactic Senate, by the way. There are some that favor Earth, but will not, as he likes to say, take a chance on being the wildebeest across the street. And it would have to take a lot more of them to do it, to make it viable. Because if one ship, let's say if one guy in a ship would cross here, they'd either be shot down or arrested by forces in the solar system. This is far more complicated than people realize. There would have to be a lot of them to come in here and do it. You were talking in private about the beings you called the Velodian medics, for instance. They would have the ability to fix this literally in a flashbang, like getting rid of the poisons. He was seeing in his head earlier, he did not realize this was part of this conversation, where he was overseeing quiet in the background. There are some factions that do this, by the way, but other bad factions put things back in, where literally in the flash, you could literally put it in a factory where all the food's processed, and it would flash these chemicals right out of it and put a replicated facsimile in there that would make it taste the same. The same goes with replicator technology and reclamator technology. That's for garbage. But for replicator, you could literally take, say, an Oreo cookie, is what he was being shown. And if it were replicated with none of the chemicals in it, it would taste like crap. But if it was replicated with the healthy stuff added in, but with the facsimile flavoring, it would taste identical. And you could do that in secret with no problem. And some of these groups know this. These factions understand this concept and are unwilling to go the extra mile. Am I laying blame completely? No. But as you have been told in the past, there are groups that are of equal power to each other. The medical group, for instance. Yes, they hold a lot of power in the medical area. Yes, they're caught up in what you would call red tape, and that may seem cold sounding compared to the oppression people are under and the suffering people are under right now. And it is. But bear in mind that the groups that are wanting to cross have equal power, cross into your space here, have equal power to that of those that are the guards at the gates. Believe it or not. Now, that's why it would take more to overpower. But they also don't want to cause a war. And it would cause, this is again, galactic red tape, galactic rules. You saw the bureaucracy involved in your movies like Jupiter Ascending and also in your Harry Potter wizarding world, you saw all the bureaucracy in the background. It's the same thing. It's quite annoying, actually. And also the fact that they wipe people's memories. He even saw in his game Hogwarts Legacy where they built a train station in the game sequence. And they even showed in this page that he was reading that said this was the biggest mass Muggle mind wipe in history. Because they needed the workers to build the station. They didn't have enough. This goes on. Like in Jupiter Ascending with all the people's minds that were wiped. All the structures were being built. Like in Harry Potter with the Reparo type of thing in your Fantastic Beasts where they repaired the city. Same thing. You don't know how many times, even in recent times, this has happened. This is an unfortunate truth. You ask, who is allowing? All of them. because with the exception of a few. I shouldn't say all of them, that's unfair. But none of them have had, let's say, the gonads to be all the groups that cross the stream. If they do it all at once, the crocodiles can't eat a herd. This is a concept that's foreign to them. But do you want that to happen all at once without some kind of foundation, permanent foundation being set up here? No. So, on top of this, you have the will. You have even the co-creation that's being sent this way amidst the dampening. That's also part of the reason for the dampening, by the way. That's also part of the reason for the nuclear warheads being pointed out in space. That's another reason they're not doing it. That's why there's groups that come in here from the interverse and the like, and the dimensional areas to try to disable those warheads every now and again. If that were to occur and all the nuclear grid would go down, you would start to see people showing up as well. Again, equal power is one of the only things that can contest galactic technology is the nuclear isotope. So that was one of the other reasons why that was invented. Would the Nazis have come up with it first? Yes, of course. But aside from the history, one of the main reasons, at least a little bit later on, also for your Star Wars program that Reagan was talking about, was to keep people away from Earth. It wasn't just to keep bad guys away. It was to keep well-intentioned people that would collapse the economy. Or like Eisenhower said, Dwight D. Eisenhower said, no, that would collapse the economy. Yes, is your commerce important? Yes, but not in the medical area. This could be corrected virtually overnight. If you want these things to happen, you have to co-create them. You have to put that out there. Or as you say, manifest differently. But you have to deny the known first. You have to deny all the stuff that's been put around you. You have to understand that there is that kind of darkness that's been in your midst the whole time. So I'll go into questions.
So to get into a little bit further detail than the broader statement that says everyone's allowing this, which means all sides are allowing this information now to be spoken about. For those that you would say that are in
who's allowing the poisoning, they're also doing it. So it's both.
Right. So I guess for those people that are allowing the poisoning, that know the bigger picture of what's going on, and allowing the food supply to be, ultra processed with things that are not good for us. I guess I just lump those people still into the category of those that want to dominate and control, because I don't know where else to put them.
Hedge betting, yeah.
Yes. So it's an interesting dynamic, because that did go through my mind today. This is a hedge betting of the gods from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to say is, what are they counting on? They're counting on it's too far gone and no one will have the strength to do anything about it. What is in it for them to allow this conversation to occur?
Some hope you find your way out of it on your own. Some flaws have been planted, and he likes to call it the Death Star routine, where the scientists put the flaw in the Death Star so the rebellion can destroy it. Isaac and his brother have done this in the programs, where people have successfully broken out of it because of this. And their brain has become immune to a lot of the programming as a result. Think of it as more of a technological inoculation in that way. Now, the other end of this spectrum, who is truly allowing it? It's this, how can I put this? It's very complicated. These hedge bettors that are out there that are running their own agenda, some of them do not want their little operation to end. Think of a drug dealer that has an operation going. Think of a meth lab that has an operation going. Do they want the cops busting them? I don't think so. This is what you have going on. Then you have the ICC in on it, and you have the Galactic Federation in on it, and there's these let's say meth lab type things going on in other parts of the galaxy. Then you have other people considered pirates that are actually more on your side. So then you have people behind it, kind of like in your Ahsoka series, for instance, where you had that twerp that was part of the council that had not been part of the rebellion and thought that everybody was just being paranoid and had PTSD and all that. Then you have retards like that. But then also on the flip side, the other half to this is why is this allowed question is, why now is this particular topic allowed to be talked about when a few years ago it was not? The answer may piss you off, which I sincerely hope it would, and him as well. And in this instance, um, this has to do with your concept on champions. This has to do with your concept on who will we pass this information through that will get through the people, knowing or unknowing. You have also both have made it quite clear you have no intention of yielding or bending, which that is admirable, very much so. But as he was also shown in a slightly different area, this also answers part of your question, but in a slightly different area. Why are other groups of people being allowed to be successful in the areas you are all speaking about, from galactic history to the lifting to conspiracy sector, all of these things, even forest people? It is because there have been champions selected in each of these areas, including, and this is why it makes the forest people very mad. This is why they wanted to get heavily involved in their own speech. This is why, even from the busts to being at Spirit Lake to any of this, they want their real voices heard, and there are champions out there that are channeling different things that are not them and saying that they are them. Or not channeling at all, and it's a ruse. I will not say who's who, because that would cause you more problem. Just know that it is happening in all areas. Why is it being allowed? Because there is a group of narratives, not just one, that they can pick: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We'll just go through A through G at the moment. There's more, but we'll go through that. You have, if A doesn't work, right, which think of A as like your fake alien invasion and Guidestone timeline and crap like that. That didn't work. Gone. B, you have, okay, let's cause civil war. Let's cause this, cause that. Yeah, people are still infighting, but it's not an all-out street-to-street fight. All right, gone. C, well, we're also making them dumb through the foods, through the psionics. And some people, it's not working. People are noticing. They're still doing it, but it's also on its way out. Done. Then you have these other narratives. Okay, we'll allow the truth in, but we're going to have some guys stand in front of Congress and talk about, or some guys stand in front of Congress and talk about the UFOs being true. Will this help in some areas? Yes, but which aliens do they let through? People have caught on in some areas by saying, oh, these men are in intelligence. This is a time to be very skeptical. So people you have seen on your YouTube saying these very words, and you saying these very words, you are on the right track. This is starting not to work correctly. Out. Now, they are taking some of the champions from the shows, from things people find popular, and funneling this even further, not allowing other aspects of the conversation to waver. This also follows not only under medical, but under some New Age precepts and also Galactic Federation propaganda precepts. What you need to know to join the Galactic Federation. This is actually quite important to your original premise for the show, because they want the dampening in place. Again, so you don't see any of this going on. They only want their select people to come in. Now, part of this has been kiboshed because some people are recognizing this, and please keep recognizing this. The poisoning of the food, poisoning of the water. People are starting to recognize this, like you saw on YouTube. People are even leaving illustrious careers, pulling a Snowden, if you will, which, again, that was part of the narrative too. You know, what got leaked and what didn't, what documents got leaked, what didn't. But there are wild cards in here that are being truthful about what they've seen. Some have seen disinformation and are unfortunately saying it. The ones you saw today were not doing this. This is making a teeter-totter effect. Wild cards versus some of the controlled champions. This is starting to push that letter in the alphabet out of the way. Ironically, that's, I believe, letter F we're at now. They get an F for effort. So now we're at, actually, no, we skipped over D and E. I just wanted to go to F. But at any rate, they've skipped over some letters in the run. Now, I ended on G for a reason. You have the whole uh, God or geometry concept, like your Masons with the G. But this is one of only one of many groups that are involved in a lot of this. And these narratives, you're seeing conflicts of narratives. The only reason you're not speaking German and have implants in your neck. They're not the only faction. They're one of the biggest ones, but they're not the only one. So you have all these other bickering over hedge betting, who are meat puppets for even bigger hedge betters, that the aliens have actually visited them and showed them how to implement certain things. Eventually, it has to reach critical mass and bust wide open. But then you have Valiant Thor and his slow drip progression through the 100 years disclosure narrative. Is this heavily part of this? It is. We are not dumping on him. This had to be revealed in layers for decoding and coding purposes to preserve also your infrastructure economy. And he realized bringing it straight to Eisenhower at the time wasn't going to work, but he did it anyway. Not saying what he did was bad, but there are other groups that deserve their say, including humanity. So, deny the known and manifest differently. But now we get to the other narratives in this via the food, which is poisoning literally everybody that doesn't have a particular gene. You'll see some people that never have gotten sick from it. He calls these the 1%ers, meaning the Martian Germans are looking for people that are the best, the best, the best. They want, like what Hitler did in World War II, looking for Aryan breeding stock kind of crapola. That's only part of it. These other hedge betting groups don't want people smart enough to notice the aliens around. They don't want people smart enough to notice people like ourselves, but yet they do. Then you have other factions that want to end this, like we do. But yet, we're one voice in a choir. You have Odin that may speak on this as well, because he has some of the potency to be able to end some of this. Not dumping on him, we're just saying he's been here a while. So, also some of the genetic manipulation, some of the stuff on his side, his family's been involved in heavily. But one final point I will make. This intersects both the Galactic Federation narrative that you're hearing about Earth joining the mighty Galactic Federation, which some aspects of it are unstoppable, being introduced to a galactic community. It's how are you introduced to that galactic community? You're on a collision course with the rest of the galaxy. There's no question about that. How do you get introduced to the rest of the galaxy, and what do you fall for? What do you truly believe? What is intuitive to you, and here what is indoctrination? You have to know this, and there's also going to be some people that just don't make it mentally out of this alive, and that's their time to leave. Then I'm not saying many, but the food poisoning, and it is food poisoning in its most raw sense, has more parasites in it than it's ever had, more chemicals in it than it's ever had. How do you think he got tapeworms 2 times? From the same place, which should have been a clue, but because it's not Japan. It may have been a Chinese buffet place, but it's not Japan. They're extremely fastidious about cleanliness there, rightfully so, and those laws will eventually encompass the planet in time because it's the best one. They're the best ones. But then you have people starting to notice this, but then they're scooted aside. They're canceled, like what happened to you guys with the World of Sasquatch from Spirit Lake talking about the changing of the guard with the DNA. Then you have others that they're funneling this through that seem to have a greater voice. Either good people are doing it or bad people are selecting champions. Either way, they're using that as a funnel. This does not mean it stays this way forever, because the more you notice this, the more you can change it. Yes, I know Isaac, knowing is half the battle. Thanks for the G.I. Joe reference. But he thinks because he's in a government program that he's suddenly turned into G.I. Joe. Okay, him and his brother. But that was I know everybody's laughing at this, but he's not the great American hero that he thinks he is. But we're disagreeing with him. Anyway, now, this is why you're coming so far from common sense, far from humor, far from sanity, far from, having things simplistic like they're supposed to be, like you sensed back in the 80s when you were talking about the darker side of the harmonic convergence, whereas that dampening increased. Poisoning in the food actually started much further back in the 60s, actually forever, but officially here it was around the time of Operation Paperclip, like what you were saying. Even further back, Nazis came up with a lot of this, but implemented it once they were over here. Continued on, binary network activated. People started to get fat, slow, and poisoned, and this is where it was slow integrated from that point, both energetically, psionically, and poison in the food, leading up to, you had the 1980s that felt pretty okay. That's why people like it, because it's away from this energy that hit in the 90s. As time progressed, people want to go back to how it was in the 80s, but the poisons weren't as strong. But B2K portions were turned on in 1980. You started to feel more and more constricted. 90s came around, even more so. Now, even more so, stronger than it's ever been. Why? Because you have been the frog boiling in the pot all along. But is there a bright side to this? Yes. Because is there an immunity factor that comes out of this? Is there like this big muscle bound effect that takes place, kind of like in your John Carter movie? He goes to Mars and he has this big bone density going there, and he can jump around like boing boing like a Mexican jumping beat. Will it have that effect psionically? You bet. But he always says turn off the machines. Okay, let me tell you what happens when that happens. You have these poisons in your system. You also have a brain that has been used to all of this, the poisons and the technology. What happens when you turn the switch off, especially with a signal this loud? In some people, it would be completely positive. They'd be completely free of it. Their brain would become immune. It would never affect them again. The bodybuilder technique. In some, the toxins and the poisons would instantly want to find their way out, and it would kill them. In some people, the decoding encoding, the ratio would be so distinct, they wouldn't survive it, and you don't know who it would be. It could be your son, it could be your mother, it could be you. This means the brain must acclimate, very much like a pressure gate, or like being in the ocean and coming up slowly. Could they do this faster than slow? Yes, they could. It's actually not, it wouldn't take very long. It would just take maybe a few years to get off of it. But if it went out now, it would not be pretty. So this is where I also with the toxins, like say if you came into our realm, there is a conversion technology that could help out with this, prevent a lot of this withdrawal. It would have to be implemented before the technology being shut off, and the likelihood of that is slim to none, especially with a blockade in place and dampening and all that in place. Now, what would happen to us if we removed our clothes or our jewelry that's blocking us? It would hurt a lot, and we felt it from your end on Midgard. You guys here are basically, you are the champions as far as I'm concerned, because under circumstances with us, if we crossed into this without protection, we'd be dead. So this is where I'm at.
Well, just continuing on with this conversation that you're having right now, it seems to be a very reasonable question to say, haven't we reached the peak of it yet? Because, I agree, and I've always felt myself that, just like you can't cold turkey off of certain drugs. You can't do it. It will kill you. And it's the same concept. It will kill a lot of people. And I absolutely agree and have always felt that there is a false sense of skill set or entitlement, or I'm not exactly sure how I want to describe it, of people thinking that it wouldn't be them.
Yeah, it's like basically saying, if you're in a vehicle and you don't put on a seatbelt, you are playing Russian roulette with other vehicles. They always say, well, then somebody goes through the windshield, survives, and it breaks their neck or breaks something, and goes, I didn't think it would happen to me. It's the same concept.
It really is, and I've always believed that. So for folks, again, that feel that they have reached a pinnacle of being at a certain place, and thus it just needs to be turned off because it hurts so much. Again, you're not guaranteed that you are going to be the one that survives the change. It's
a metamorphosis that would take place as a lot of things have been held back, both chemically and psionically. You turn that off, it's a slingshot effect.
Right. And so I guess you need to really think about that. But however, it seems to me that there really, even if you're at the 100-year disclosure mark, even if you're doing it the slow boat way, even if you do, there is a moment where it's got to start to be turned down. And it has really gotten to a level when you see so many people now, the disease processes that are turning on to people that are so quickly happening now. I mean, you've got to look at just the population of a whole. How much of a population drop is going to really be allowed before you even start turning this down? And that bothers the crap out of me because, again, it is very difficult for me to not look at those that are watching this, be it whatever, and say, how much is the humanity loss acceptable to them? What percentage is acceptable? And, are you saying that with ever being human to walk this earth to know that maybe I'm sorry, are you being a little complicit also to this when you're not even allowing it to start turning down yet? And that bothers the crap out of me.
Yes, you are correct. It is literally the loudest that it's ever been. When you started talking about these subjects years ago, it would be about 7 years ago now, you thought that it was at its apex. Nope. Even then, if you had shut it off, you would be running into these issues. So at the time, Thomas was not wrong when he said this. He was being over dramatic like his dumb self. So at that time, he was basically describing that it would be instant death for everyone. Comedy, tragedy. No, that's not how this works. Would there be those that survived it? Yes. In his head, I'm comparing it to a game called Fable 3, where this darkness comes in, and you think people could survive this without resources and without backing. Then it was financial backing in the game, but you understand what I'm saying. Or fortitude or armaments. None of them do in the game, except for a handful. And this is exactly what the bad guys would want, because there'd be all these unoccupied buildings, and who would occupy them? Their alien buddies. And then time goes on. Now, if it was just down to people bitching about some little thing or other, races would be here already. This and if this wasn't on at all, if this had never been turned on, and it was just about humanity not being psychologically ready, you would have aliens here already walking openly amongst you, and they would just know that it would be okay. But the reason the encoding decoding thing is such a big issue, it normally would not be. You'd blink a couple times and you'd be all right. This is why the story of that security guard seeing that insectoid was so crucial, is because he fell over dead from a stroke and a heart attack. Because again, the slingshot effect, the psionic field of that being started to counteract the one that was around him dead. And it was shock. People thought it was fear that did it. No, he could have survived that. Some people die of fright, yes, just like you have some animals like the mice and dogs and cats that die of fright, monkeys, all this. But humans would get over this fairly quickly, like in your Star Trek episode with where it's through, twin, where Kirk is twinned, good and evil, and the dog that they send through that had also been twinned dies from the shock. Kirk goes through and he lives because humans and other beings have neocortex, not denigrating animals because they're an eternal soul. And they sometimes can be smarter than humans can be sometimes, and far more compassionate at a lot of times, but completely different life form structure. A human under regular circumstances looking at an alien and being in shock would be all right. Except maybe some people would commit suicide over belief system, like what Gene Roddenberry said with that alien revealing syndrome, whatever it was, where people killed themselves in weird ways. I'm sorry to say, something like that would happen. And even under normal circumstances, you'd lose a few people. But in this circumstance, with the Nazis turning this up, with the volume up way up, and the technology you have around here adding to it, and it adds to it. It's more of a supplemental type of thing going on. It's coming through it, but there's other things being added through your tech. Look how cool this tech is. You can do more of your stupid crap online when you have towers. Where there was a commercial where a girl was just grinning into the phone, and you said you have to have this, the tower. It's that propaganda. That aside, if it was under normal circumstances, you'd already have us out in the open. This is the crux of the whole thing.
But again, I can't help say it again, that, it's reached this crescendo to a point where, like you're saying, nobody wants to be the wildebeest crossing the stream, but then don't you all just become a little complicit in it as well?
Yes.
And almost watching, you may not label it a genocide, but it really is one.
Yes,
and
they would.
So I'm sorry, that's really how I feel about it. It is very interesting. I will say that a certain Venusian statistician did say to us, probably, I'm going to say it was 19 or 20, somewhere in that time frame where it's recorded, it's somewhere, talking about the next industry that was really going to get a hard look would be the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm like, wow, it's finally about time.
And yes, this also, like what happened in 2020, that happened. Some things are allowed. This is another area. Some things are allowed so that it gets people to pay attention to what's going on. And that's still a truth. And this is actually going on now, regardless of the agenda, is still what's happening.
However, again, I think where the complication is they don't have a problem with us discussing that the food is poor, but they don't want the connection to be seen about how the pharmaceutical companies are participant and complicit in having a food supply that is poor, to make you ill, to make you dependent on their pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
And so it's that cycle of how it all is interconnected, just like we're saying a whole body system. This is a whole body system of corporations that are now complicit with one another to achieve a particular goal. And which is why I guess this is going to be on Rumble because of what I just said. But
yes.
But that is kind of the truth that is actually out there. Maybe the hedge betting that part of it won't be heard or understood. That you can take them as separate components. They are not separate components.
Yes, they are not separate components. And if you do not care for all this hedge betting, regardless of what these groups want, if you don't want them to do it anymore, make yourself heard. Recognize they exist, for one. Recognize their meat puppets exist. Don't just see it as conspiracy theory. That's what the meat puppets made you think. Keep going with this. Follow this rabbit hole all the way to the end. Regardless of what weird thoughts are popping in your head, regardless of the dampening that's taking place, regardless of the series of unfortunate events, the distractions that keep you, even the stumbling, bumbling, running into things, hitting your head, all this other stuff. don't fall for the distractions. Don't fall for the holograms. Don't fall for the day-to-day ADHD trip from hell, where a trip would normally take a couple hours and it takes all day. Don't allow it. We know these things happen, but recognize them as abnormal when they do, and a pattern. Recognize the pattern when it shows up, and then you will begin to actually start to undo this if enough of you see this. Even just seeing it, just like if you watch a subject, you affect the subject. That is true. If all of you are focused on the same subject, think of the experiment they did on the Washington Mall where everyone meditated. Crime globally dropped by a lot, nearly, I believe, 20%, I believe it was. Imagine if everyone did this and focused on a single goal, regardless of what you believe. But you got to know, regardless of what you believe, something is fucked up.
So again, we brought up a book when we tried to have this conversation before, when we were talking about, champions and how they were brought out. One of the most interesting ones, it happened many, many years ago. Again, Weird Scenes in the Canyon.
Yes.
And that book talks about what was happening in the days of, the originations of rock and roll, where you had, your champions like Jim Morrison and people that were brought out to be these antithesis. And then you find out their connections to family members, their own parents that were actually a part of the other side. And so again, we've not yet.
Jim Morrison and his father that started the Vietnam War and the Van Tompkins. Yes.
Correct. And so again, it's a book out there. I think you can still get a hold of it. Weird Scenes in the Canyon. What I guess it's coming up again for rediscussion, not because anything's changed, but because it hasn't changed. And so what you have to understand is that when we talk about, again, there are connections with these whistleblowers and champions that are not disconnecting them from certain things to push certain pieces of information out, that will be running an agenda of disclosure, of change, that maybe still not be for your highest good. It's not creating an organic unity. Let's just put it like that. With a lot of these things and these disclosure and what's moving ahead for humanity, you want humanity to be informed. You want humanity to be able to drive some of these decisions rather than a forced dialogue that's being allowed out that will only have you wearing something like this. It is only going to lead you to a certain conclusion of what you think you want, because everything else is being left out.
Look for sharp contrasts in your media. Even in the theater puppets, look for sharp contrasts. Like he said, comedy, tragedy, order, chaos. Look for these theater concepts. Look into the concepts of theater, stage, play. He says mice and scene being placed on set. He says that in regards to the Agent Smith effect, where people are, in effect, affected to be placed on set to become the distractions. Like he said, the woman in her session said when it didn't happen, all these people in her family were primed to be the distractions that day. And when it didn't happen, they walked. Look for these patterns, either with the Agent Smith effect, B2K, or all around. Look for these opposing sides, the yin and yang. I mean, there is a yin and yang in reality, but look for the planned ones. Look for the ones that either opposing voice very loudly or before a voice very loudly, or depending on what side of it you're on, it's going to be for or against. You see, he calls it the for and against conspiracy, whereas there is always a for and against, like Jim Morrison and his father, anti-war, pro-war, basically saying, oh, those Vietnamese that are not technologically even close to us are coming right for us. Oh, they're shooting at us. Let's go get them. That's basically what happened right there. So, and they met in the canyon to discuss how they were planning all of these strategies out. They also do this, even though they have the satanic rituals at Bohemian Grove, they actually do some of this too. You would be surprised where some of these discussions take place. The scenes in the canyon actually took place in that one canyon, but at the same time, some people sit in their parents' basement discussing this. He even saw a show here and back again with an actor named Eric Close, whereas the other associates in the secret government program had put someone's consciousness in a different body, in a superior body, like superior genes. Well, they were discussing they would go to rental properties and discuss their plans and tell, say the realtor, we'd like to be alone to discuss our plans here, or discuss things. And they would go to rental properties, warehouses, homes, everything, how they would discuss things and waste the realtor's time. But they do this quite often. Some of these groups, like the aviary group, work out of a house. They did to begin with. Just like you have your Bill Gates and also Steve Jobs and everybody creating their wares originally out of a garage. The origin stories of these things. What do you think the origin stories a lot of these false flags are? They are literally sitting in a living room, all talking, yakking with each other, either in a garage, a house, a basement, a warehouse. They rarely do it in an office. Now the ones that do the paper headlines, where they run those narratives for the paper headlines, the script writer types, they will do things in an office, like a print office, a lot. They're the only ones that do this. But the ones that do the most are sitting in some structure somewhere, like in the canyon, or like you have your like the larger land, like Camp David. That's happened there before. Or even on a golf course, they discuss divvying up the country amongst themselves. But at the same time, that's the hedge bidding, like what was discussed on him and Ryan's show as well, the different hedge bidding going on. But a lot of those planning that you hear about, the for and against conspiracy, you're sitting in a room very much like they plan these things out in.
So just, I guess to end this, I think it's one of the things that we constantly say, am I glad they're talking about this? Of course, I'm glad they're talking about this. It's not, the picture isn't just that they're talking about it. The picture is really, why are they talking about it? What is this leading to? What's going on? I hate to say it, but in the Black Ops, they already know all the answers. They know how to clean the water.
By the time you hear it, they've already done it.
They know all of it. So what the interesting thing is that how are they going to use this as an agenda, which will relate, it will move its way up the head to disclosure, to whom they are going to allow to come in to be the saviors, to clean the water, to clean the land,
yes,
to clean the food, to clean whatever, when all of those things are already known, who is going to be aligned with, okay, as a part of who they are choosing.
The fireman and the arsonist, one and the same.
Yes. Exactly. So you have to understand what is occurring in front of you. The more, I am glad that people are just going to have this level of the discussion about the food, about the pharmacies. I am glad. Some people aren't ready for any other discussion, but at that level. But if you can bring it into your consciousness that you don't want this done, then that will certainly be helpful for humanity.
Down, yeah.
Right. But there is also a bigger conversation, a bigger reason, a bigger thing, and it is not natural unity. And that's what the one thing that, if I have to say, that we promote, is we want organic, natural unity to be able to develop, and not, again, a forced narrative that will be deception for you all, so that you cannot make an appropriate conversation and decision on what you really want, because there is an agenda being run. And so we want, for those that are ready for the conversation of an even bigger picture, that's why we're talking now. But I'm not saying that we aren't thrilled that these other conversations are beginning, but you cannot let your guard down.
Yes, and you don't know which one of these will be elected the spokesperson for a race like that. That would be to fix the problem. It's very much like your concept also in your Good Omens, where you had the two of them split. At the end, you had Crowley and Aziraphale. They represented allegorically a couple concepts that you are actually struggling with now. Aziraphale was essentially, the system is broken, fix it. Crowley was, no, the system is working exactly as it was designed, dismantle it. You have this chicken and egg argument in your society right now, and that's what those two figureheads represented in that show. That's what the author was trying to say. In this, Neither one is completely wrong. You would have to set aside those differences because they don't really want you in that argument. The chicken and the egg concept, very much like some galactics and celestials argue which came first, nature or space. It's very much like that. The truth of it is, it's both a repair and a dismantling. Just know that you would literally, not a forced unity, you need an organic unity, like he says, which you are on a collision course with some aspects of the New World Order. I will say this, but it doesn't need to go down that way. You can have countries with their own currencies have it converted into galactic standard. You can have other countries with their beliefs remain as they are and evolve at their rates and still have the planet opened up to galactic commerce. It is not impossible to do this. Earth is unique in this area. It is not impossible to do this. We have our own cultures. You know how many, we have our own cultures here. You know how many people passed into the area of Lanulos in our dimension and seen a couple naked people walking around and freaked? People that had even thought that they were open to that, saw that, and went and just kind of went, what in the hell? That was actually being mild. Some of the biggest titfits you'll ever see has happened over that issue. We are more open that way because that's how our culture is in on our world. And there are some of you here that are like that. So you'd be more accepting. This is what I'm saying. Some of those differences can be overcome. But there are some that would be a shock to what you know. That was one of them. Some of those people, some of them even fainted. Believe it or not, some of the people that had some of the most compatible genetics to open up and unlock, and energies to open and unlock the stone rings, were those with real stringent belief systems, like Christianity. And it's happened, where they come from a family lineage, like in your Stargate SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis and Stargate Universe, where some people touch piece of technology. There was one person that found a piece of ancient technology at a garage sale. He had the ancient gene and it turned it on, and he had a telepathic link with Colonel O'Neill, and he got a download of all the missions Colonel O'Neill, Richard Dean Anderson's character, had been on over a 8 to 10 year, 12-year period. And he wrote them all down, and then somebody stole the scripts as a show. They were showing how it was delivered in the media. See, they were telling you how they were doing it. In this, it's the same thing. Sometimes people are both genetically and energetically predisposed to activate the old ancient technology. That was actually accurate. Some of the most stringent belief systems of people that are in people have passed into Lanulos. They have been subsequently mind wiped and set out, but it has happened. And it was at first a mystery as to how in the hell that happened. People are scratching their heads. They're like, then it was determined it had absolutely nothing to do with their belief system. It had to do with their energy and the harmonics that the technology was hearing. It has to do with sound and light pitches. Also, some genetics emit it more than others. Like some people have a more enhanced psionic field than others. This was a mystery that was happening for a while until they determined some of those people also had tall white lineages as well, of whom invented the technology. Somebody you know of, who I'm not going to mention his name, also was at a place called the Gate of Amaramuro, whereas you would stick your head inside of a lock and whistle. This would open the whole gate up, and you'd come to our area. Or you go wherever you want to another relay. Same thing goes in your Star Trek with a progenitor or a preserver tech. Kirk opens his communicator. It opens a trapdoor. He falls in and hits his head and gets zapped, like you saw in Discovery. Somebody else got zapped by the tech. It was the same thing. This has happened. These accidents have happened. People have passed in through portals and disappeared because they chose to stay over here, which they were given the choice and the opportunity to do so. Even both of you have been in our area a long time ago, mind you, in another reality. But yeah, this is the reason I skewed is sometimes it does not matter where you are. It just matters the energy that's around you. And in some cases, it does matter where you are. But in the case of the cyanic dampening, you don't know what it's hit with the poison. You don't know what your body is being affected by. Like there's food you're consuming. Say you go and eat a cheeseburger somewhere, and they've added some of this to it. Do you know? Are you a molecular biologist? Do you know what they've added and the tripwires they've added within that once it hits the body and what they do in a particular genome? How do you know that it's not going to affect the most adept of all of you? Or how do you know other ones will affect the least adept of all of you? Not to divide you up into categories. This was designed to not only affect you all, but the cyanic dampening was designed to also identify those that were identifying it. You say that goes after the warriors first, because their heads are above the stream, and what's going to hit them? The crocodile. And that's where targeted individuals come in. Everyone's target. Every man, woman, and child on this planet is being affected. Hell, we even feel your nuclear radioactivity on lanulose. This is why a lot of the introverse races are trying to put an end to that, because it hurts. So we get it. It doesn't affect everybody, but it affects other parts that are not Midgard. It's dimensional in nature when that explodes. It's still affected parts of the introverse to this day that are being fixed. The only reason Chernobyl is being left the way it is so people learn from it and undo it and fight against it, or else it would be cleaned up today. The garbage issue too. This is why the Mer aren't touching it. They're just whining about it. But eventually they would have to get involved if it got too much more. Like Garbage Island, for instance. This is what the kind of crap I'm talking about. Yes, there's a learning curriculum, but it's not all this way. It is because you have been told by the chemical inducement, by belief, and by psionic inducement that you must tolerate all these things because you must giveth unto Caesar. And giveth unto Caesar belongs to Caesar, giveth unto God what belongs to God. And neither one of those are true. This is where I will leave this, but just know that you do not have to tolerate anything that is actually causing any of this suffering. Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No, thank you.
Ooh, all right. Yeah. Her being part some tall white in her lineage. They were talking about the whistling technology or the sound pitch technology, and the ring by which they go into this ring here. So these are stone rings. They're just extremely ancient tech that has been eroded. Just like your Mammoth Cave has in Kentucky or Tennessee, going into Tennessee has, and it's in both states actually. Some you don't see. Some look like tables and chairs, and they try to pass that off. And it was an ancient galactic meeting room that water got in there and formed the stalagmites millions of years ago. So that's the kind of thing they're talking about. You're seeing all of these things, remnants or areas that were once open within the whole world empire that existed a long time ago. So I know we skewed, but both these parts of the conversation are one thing. They never were not one thing. So this will be primarily a Rumble conversation. I'm extremely hesitant to put it on YouTube. I might try it, but we'll see what actually happens in the aftermath. I have my doubts, but
Well, we're just getting a feeling that
Yeah.
we're probably going to have to ship most of our work over to Rumble.
yes. So if you're seeing this on our YouTube channel, and I'll repeat this in other recordings too, if you're seeing me say this in any respect, just know we are slowly ferrying stuff over to the Rumble. And we have several Rumble accounts for Sasquatch, GIC, all those. Just know we are ferrying these things over. In the event something would happen, I'm also going to make a couple of duplicate Facebooks as well, just in case they decide to go full retard. Yes, thank you, Isaac. I will say that. So that alone will get you canceled. The R word. Okay, yes, I understand. But I think we're good here, Joanna. If you want to add anything.
No, we hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And again, we want to send blessings to everyone. We did not open this properly, just to let you know, but I think we're okay.
Oh, yeah. I did not, this is another area where we forget. They try to get us to forget. So we go, oh crap, what did we do? So what I'm going to do, what you'll see put at the beginning of this is saying circle open. If I print it on there, it reacts the same way as if I've said it. So I will also date what I just said. I'm opening the circle within true benevolence at this moment in time. And I'm now closing this circle within true benevolence at this moment in time. So thank you for subscribing to this channel. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for looking at all our materials. So bye-bye now.